Did you know that Google personalizes many searches by city and Also Asked is the only tool to access live People Also Asked data at city level? Try for free at alsoasked.com.
I was going to say that SEO with Fat Joe is as peaceful as this, but then the birds are all having fights.
Tired of SEO guesswork? Quadra's AI agent goes deeper to uncover high-impact optimizations and completes hours of SEO in minutes. Get started now.
Thank you. Good to see so many faces on a Friday afternoon. We weren't really expecting this. I wanted to start today by sharing why I think this topic is important before I dive deep into GA4 and some interface and insights. So Content Square releases their benchmark report every year, so they released their 2025 benchmark report earlier this year. There was some really interesting and scary findings. So the first one is that conversion rates are declining by 10% year on year. To make this even worse, the cost of a visit is increasing 9% year on year. And what that means is that it's costing more for us to get users to a website. They're converting less, so the cost of conversion is also rising. And of course, what this means is optimizing the website experience has never been more important. And having an optimization process that's going to drive results is even more important, because it's such a big process. For anyone who has a CRO program will know that there's so many roles involved, from UX, insights, devs, strategy. So you want to make sure that when you're putting in that effort that you're going to get results. And Optimizely have released a report, and they have found that only 12% of experiments win, which means that there's a lot of effort for a lot less reward. But including data is what's going to help increase that win rate. So everything we do in Hookflash is deep-rooted in data, and we analysed our win rate across all of our experiments in 2024, and we had a 53% win rate. And a lot of people will argue that we've just tested a lot of low-hanging fruit, really easy, quick wins. That's not the case. We really have tested quite advanced tests, personalizations. Really, the secret, and not so secret sauce, is data. So Optimizely, as I said, have released this report, and what's even more interesting is they found that on a test-by-test basis, any test that included data was 34% more likely to be successful. And the more data sources that were included, the more successful the test was likely to be. So that's exactly what I'm going to focus on today, is how you can include data into your CRO strategy to help you drive better results. And when we include data in our testing program, we try to use as many data sources as possible. So whether it's GA, Hotjar, Content Square, survey results, basically anything we could possibly get our hands on. But of course, in 20 minutes, I'm really not going to be able to cover that many data sources. So for today, I am going to focus on just GA4 and some of the really simple insights that you can get to help you build that CRO strategy. And the first thing that I would say is, I know everyone has a love-hate relationship with explorations, but you need to get comfortable with explorations. Using the out-of-the-box reports is not going to get you far enough. And being able to dive deeper, the only way that you're going to be able to do that is through explorations. And I know that no one loves it. No one loves GA4, but it's really what's going to enhance your strategy. And of course, there's lots of techniques. There's lots of different tables, visualizations. And I can't cover all of those today either, but I would recommend that you really get familiar with all of the 7 techniques that are available, and all of the visualizations, of course, that are available within each of these techniques. But I will cover 3 of these today. So the first thing that I would recommend to start to include data into your CRO strategy is to map the questions that you want to answer. So I wouldn't just dive straight into explorations, make 10 different tabs, build all your different tables. The first thing I would start with is mapping, what do you actually want to find out? Like, what do you want to know? So I'm going to give some examples, and hopefully it will give you a good idea of where to start. So I'll start quite basic. So let's take the example of what devices are my users using to visit my site. So really basic, and then also, is there any difference in performance across these devices? So to start off, this one is a really quick win. You add your device category as your dimension, sessions as your metric, and great, I know now that 77% of my users are using a mobile device. I know that what I need to do is make sure that any designs that I do are mobile first. And then, really easy again, quick flat table, adding device as your dimension again, but then adding a few more metrics in here to give me a better picture of performance. So I've still got sessions on there, I've added bounce rate, session key event rate. Just make sure if you've got more than one key event that you've filtered by session start and purchase to get conversion rate. Purchases and purchase revenue. And really quickly you can start to get an idea of what the performance across those different device types looks like. So we can see here that performance is significantly higher on desktop, which isn't surprising. We know that from industry benchmarks. It's always been in the industry. But what it really allows us to do, and this is why this kind of simple data can go a long way in your CRO strategy, is it allows us to understand what is the size of the prize. So I'm not saying that this is revolutionary in terms of knowing that desktop performs better than mobile. What it helps you to do is go back to the business and say, this is where we should focus our CRO strategy because we know the size of the prize. So you have sessions, you have AOV. What you can calculate is for every 1% improvement that I make to the mobile performance, this is what I'm going to achieve. And that is how you can go back to the business and quantify the impact that your CRO strategy can have from those two really simple visualizations that you can do in less than 5 minutes. But then diving a bit deeper, so what are the top landing pages for users to start on? And again, really quick visualization here. I've added landing page as my dimension. And for anyone who hasn't noticed yet, we now have landing page without query string in GA4. And sessions. So really quick visualization. And what you can see from this is, the home page is the top landing page, followed by one of the collection pages, etc. But I don't really like this visualization because I don't think it gives you the full picture. So what I really like to do is categorize pages by page type. And I appreciate that this can be done in the data layer, and you can send it as its own dimension, but not everyone has access to developers and the luxury of doing that. So I wanted to share a really easy way to start to categorize your landing pages a bit better. So what I've done in Looker Studio that you can see here is categorize all of the pages by page type. And I think what's really interesting here is the picture changes. So actually, one of the product pages wasn't listed as any of the top 3 landing pages, but actually the majority of users land on a product page. But when you're looking at the URLs and all the page paths are unique, you can't necessarily get that picture. And what we can see here is we're sending over 70% of our traffic to product pages, and actually it's one of the worst converting landing pages. So switching that view to a higher level, and then you can always go back to GA4 to see, okay, all of those product pages, what were the top product pages, and then go more granular. But I like to always start with this picture so I can get an idea of what are the page types that users are landing on. And of course, this has shifted because of channels like PMax, paid social, all sending traffic to product pages. So it's really important that we can kind of map that journey and understand that performance. And this is how it's done. So you can add a calculated field in Looker Studio. For anyone with Shopify, this is basically plug and play because all of the URL structures are pretty much the same. And all you need to do, if you don't have Shopify, is slightly change the regex. So all we're saying is, when the landing page matches this regex expression, actually call this home. When it matches this expression, call it product. And that's exactly what you saw on the previous slide here. This is what it splits out. And I just think this visualization helps you get a better picture of the user journey than at the granular level that you get in GA4, and then you can work to the more granular level. And moving on then, what if I wanted to look at how the PDP performance is impacted by user journeys? So I know, for example, that not all users land on the PDP. So I've seen how it performs on the PDP, but that's not the only way that users are going to actually access a PDP. So the next thing to look at is users who start on the PDP. So all I've done here is create a segment of users where their landing page matches a product page, same regex as in Looker Studio, so you can reuse that in GA4 if you're not comfortable with regex. And what I'm going to compare it to is users who don't land on a PDP but also view a PDP in their session. So maybe they landed on one of those other higher converting landing pages like the home page or the collections page that we saw back in the Looker Studio screenshot. And this one's really simple as well. So all I've done is said you viewed the page which contains product, but you didn't land there. So that's how I'm excluding anyone who landed on the PDP to get the difference in performance across both journeys. So now I've mapped out two different user journeys, but both engaging with a PDP. So we know that one user journey starts there, another user journey lands there. I haven't necessarily specified doesn't land there, sorry. I haven't necessarily specified where they've landed, but I know that they didn't land there, they navigated there through other pages. And what's really interesting when you look into this, and of course it's not going to be the same across every client, every website, but this is a really interesting one for you to have a look at, because basically what we can see quite quickly here is that the PDP as a landing page does not perform as well as a PDP as part of other user journeys. So we can see that the PDP performs almost twice as well when a user doesn't land there. So when they go through a different journey, for example, a home page to a collections page through to a PDP, they're much more likely to convert. So really what's key here is that we need to optimize the PDP as a landing page. That kind of one-size-fits-all landing page isn't necessarily working here. So it's the same page, it's the same experience, but we have two completely different journeys not performing. And then finally, one other piece that I would look at is what is the journey then on from the PDP. So I know that's my top page, I know that users are landing there, I know that users are navigating there, I know that there's different performance. So the last thing I would look at then is, was the onward journey from the PDP? And actually, one of the things that we did benefit from GA4 was improved funnels, thankfully. And this is really simple. So all I've done is made a funnel from PDP to add to cart to begin checkout to purchase, so I can start to see where the drop-off points are. And I've just broken it out here by device category, but you could do it by the segments that we had before in terms of whether they landed there or whether they navigated there, and understand if there's a different drop-off point across this funnel for those different segments. You could break it out, whatever way you wanted. But you can see quite quickly, even by breaking it out by device, that the mobile drop-off between PDP and add to cart is significantly higher than desktop, which isn't going to be a surprise because we know that the conversion rate is higher on desktop anyway. But you can start to break it down by different dimensions and understand where's the biggest opportunities to optimize. And for funnels, what I see a lot of clients doing is only using events in funnels, but one of the big benefits of funnels in GA4 is that you can mix dimensions. So you'll see that I've just added PDP, so page path matches the regex of products, again, just reusing the same regex, and then you can move on to events, and you can switch between the two different dimensions. And the one thing to note, though, with funnels is they are user scoped. So it's just one thing to be careful of, is the scope is slightly different than, we were looking at sessions with landing page. This is a user scope. So what have we found across all of these insights? The first is that mobile drives 70% of traffic but converts significantly lower than desktop. We know that 30% of all traffic lands in a PDP but was one of the lowest converting landing pages. And then sessions viewing the PDP but not landing there are 103% more likely to convert. So you can see so quickly from 4 tables or visualizations in GA4 and 1 visualization in Looker Studio, we've really started to build a more data-driven CRO strategy. We're starting to understand where we should focus our efforts and what a roadmap could look like for PDP optimization, or where we should at least start with optimization. Especially because landing page optimization, I always feel like, is such a buzzword, and this at least gives you an idea of where to start. And then, of course, going that step further, knowing the size of the prize. So we find mobile landing page, PDP, needs optimization, and going back to that point of putting a value on what that optimization would look like, you can go back to your size of the prize. So optimizing the PDP as a landing page for mobile devices would drive X revenue for every 1% that we improve it. So we know, the business, this is why we're focusing on this, and how those small incremental gains over time, exactly what we're trying to do at CRO, is continuously optimize. This is what we could be looking at in terms of value that we're going to drive for the business. Hopefully you found that useful. If you have, please do connect on LinkedIn. I do try to share a lot of practical tips and content. And thank you very much.